Welcome back to another deep dive into the darkest corners of Fallout lore. Today, we are exploring one of the most disturbing experiments in Vault-Tec history, a 200-year breeding program designed to create a master race of corporate managers. This is the story of Vault 31 Buds and the immortal brain in a jar that spent 2 centuries playing God with human genetics. The story of how Vault-Tec turned people into livestock and called it optimization. Let's descend into the vault and uncover the truth. They told me my father was born in Vault 33, just like me. They told me our community was special, chosen, destined to rebuild America someday. They told me every overseer came from Vault 31 because they were simply better educated, more prepared, more capable. I believed every word of it. I believed it when I cast my vote. I believed it when I attended the weddings. I believed it even when my cousin Chet whispered that something felt wrong about how perfectly everything always worked out. But belief is a fragile thing when you follow the maintenance tunnels far enough, when you ignore the warnings and push through the sealed door marked authorized personnel only when you find rows of frozen bodies wearing badges that say Vault-Tec executive on them. My name is Rebecca Torres, and I discovered that my entire life was a lie, engineered before I was born. I discovered that my father did not come from our vault at all. He came from a cryogenic pod in Vault 31, thawed out like a pre-war steak, sent into our population with one mission: breed the next generation of corporate slaves. The discovery happened 3 months ago, but it feels like yesterday. I was on maintenance duty, checking the water filtration systems in the lower levels. Standard work, boring work, the kind of assignment where your mind wanders and you start noticing things you should not. Like how the tunnel to Vault 31 had fresh scuff marks on the floor, despite being sealed for decades. Like how the biometric lock showed recent access attempts in the system logs. Like how someone had very carefully painted over rust stains that indicated regular use. I should have reported it. I should have gone back to my quarters and forgotten what I had seen. But curiosity is stronger than self-preservation when you have spent your whole life being told you are safe, that everything is under control, that Vault-Tec has your best interests at heart. I waited until the night shift when most people were asleep or watching the evening movie in the rec hall. I brought basic tools, nothing sophisticated, just a wrench and a screwdriver and a spare power cell from the workshop. The biometric lock was surprisingly easy to bypass once I realized it was not actually locked at all. Someone had set it to appear sealed while leaving the mechanism disengaged. Later, I would understand why. Later, I would learn that Bud Askins needed to move between vaults, freely needed to wake his frozen executives and send them into our population like wolves among sheep. But that night, I just felt a strange thrill as the massive door groaned open, revealing a corridor I had never seen before. The air smelled different, stale, recycled too many times. The lights flickered in a pattern that suggested they had been running for 2 centuries without maintenance. Emergency power only. My footsteps echoed in a way that made the space feel vast and empty, like a cathedral built for a religion that had died out. I walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes. The corridor ended at another door, this one marked cryogenic storage. My hands shook as I opened it. The room stretched out before me, filled with pods arranged in perfect rows. Each pod had a small window frosted with ice crystals, and through that frost, I could see faces. Frozen faces. Dead faces? No. Their status lights showed green, active, occupied, alive. I moved closer to the nearest pod and wiped away the frost. A woman, maybe 40 years old, wearing a business suit from before the war. Her badge said, Betty Pearson, Junior Vice President, Human Resources. I recognized that name. Betty Pearson was our new overseer, the one who had taken over after raiders kidnapped my father during Lucy MacLean's wedding. But that Betty Pearson looked 30, maybe 35 at most. This Betty Pearson in the pod looked older, frozen in time, from 200 years ago. I checked another pod. Henry MacLean, Executive Assistant to Senior Vice President Barbara Howard. The face matched my father exactly, but 20 years younger, preserved at the moment he had been frozen before the bombs fell. I felt sick. I felt cold. I felt my entire understanding of reality cracking like ice over deep water. How could my father be frozen here if he was also at home in Vault 33? When had he been thawed? Why had no one told us? What did it mean that every overseer, every leader we had ever had came from this room? That is when the robot appeared, a skeleton on wheels rolling toward me with surprising speed. But it was not the metal bones that made me freeze. It was the glass dome mounted where the head should be, and inside that dome, a human brain, pink and wrinkled and undeniably alive, floating in some kind of preservation fluid. The brain spoke to me through a speaker mounted on its chassis. The voice sounded cheerful, almost friendly, like a manager greeting an employee at a pre-war corporate retreat. "Well, hello there. I do not recognize you from the approved access list. Let me just scan your biometric data and oh my, you are Rebecca Torres, Vault 33, resident daughter of Antonio Torres. Antonio came from Pod 17, Row 7. He is one of my buds, though, not one of the originals. Second generation thaw, activated in 2089. Your mother was Samantha Chen, excellent genetic markers for positivity and conflict aversion. Your pairing was, let me check, yes, arranged. Through the council's recommendation system. Everything by the book." I could not speak. My voice had died somewhere between seeing my father in the pod and watching this brain on a robot skeleton casually discuss my parents like they were data points in an experiment. The robot rolled closer. The brain pulsed slightly as it talked, as if the act of speech required physical effort, even in this bizarre artificial housing. "I am Bud Askins, Senior Junior Vice President of Vault-Tec Corporation. Well, I was Senior Junior Vice President. Now I am just Overseer of Vault 31, which makes me technically speaking your boss's boss's boss. I created Bud's Buds. That is what we call this program. You are standing in the middle of my life's work. Literally. These pods contain the finest junior executives Vault-Tec ever employed, handpicked, trained, optimized for management. And every few decades, I wake one up and send them to run Vaults 32 and 33. They marry your people. They have children. They breed the next generation of perfect managers. It is beautiful, really. Elegant, self-sustaining. The thing I remember most clearly is how proud he sounded, how genuinely pleased with himself, like a man showing off a prize-winning garden, not describing 2 centuries of human breeding experiments. He rolled around me in a slow circle, the brain bobbing gently in its fluid. I found my voice, finally, though it came out as a whisper. "Why? Why would you do this?" Bud Askins' mechanical body stopped moving. The speaker crackled slightly before his voice emerged warm and patient, like a teacher explaining a simple concept to a slow student. "Because the future of humanity comes down to one word: management. Most people think saving humanity means preserving knowledge or technology or genetic diversity, but they are thinking small. They are thinking in 3 dimensions. I think in 4. The 4th dimension is time, and time is the ultimate weapon. We do not have to outfight our enemies. We do not have to outsmart them. We just have to outlive them. Everyone who opposed Vault-Tec, everyone who questioned our methods, everyone who thought they could build a better world without us, they are all dead now, turned to dust. But we are still here. My buds are still here. And when the vaults finally open, when Reclamation Day comes, the only people left alive will be Vault-Tec people. We win by default. We win through time." He said this like it was obvious, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. I thought about my childhood, about the lessons we learned in school, about the propaganda films we watched. I thought about the elections where we would vote for Overseer, and the only candidates were always from Vault 31. I thought about the saying we all knew by heart: when things look glum, vote 31. I thought about every wedding I had attended, every couple I had celebrated, every baby I had helped welcome into the world. All of it planned, all of it controlled, all of it arranged by this brain in a jar who had convinced himself that playing God with human lives was just good management practice. "You are insane," I said. "I am efficient," he corrected. "There is a difference. Insanity would be trying to save everyone. Insanity would be hoping that humanity could rebuild itself without guidance. What we are doing here is insurance. We are ensuring that the right kind of people inherit the earth, people with positivity, people who make lemonade when life gives them lemons, people who understand that management is the key to everything." I looked at the pods again, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. How many junior executives had Vault-Tec frozen? How many times had this cycle repeated? How many children like me had been born from arranged marriages, our genetics selected, our personalities optimized through 200 years of careful breeding? I was not a person. I was livestock. We all were. Every resident of Vault 33, every marriage, every birth, all of it was just Bud Askins playing selective breeding with human beings, like we were corn or cattle or prize dogs. "What about Vault 32? I asked. "What happened there?" The brain pulsed faster for a moment. Even trapped in fluid, even reduced to just gray matter and electrical impulses, I could tell I had struck a nerve. His voice came out slightly less cheerful. Vault 32 experienced a classification error. They discovered the true nature of the program approximately 2 years ago. The information caused significant psychological trauma among the population. There was violence, mass casualty events. The vault is currently offline, but the experiment continues in Vault 33. You are proof of that. Classification error, that is what he called it. Not they learned the truth, not they found out they were breeding stock. Classification error, like they had received the wrong memo, like someone had misfiled a document. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and sharp, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed information. I needed to understand the full scope of this nightmare. "How long?" I asked. "How long has this been going on?" "Since 2077. I was frozen on October 23rd, the day the bombs fell. My brain was removed and placed in this mobile housing shortly afterward, before the cryogenic process. It was the only way to ensure continuous oversight of the program. Someone had to wake the buds on schedule. Someone had to monitor the genetic outcomes. Someone had to make sure the breeding program stayed on track. I have been awake in this form for 219 years. I have overseen 7 generation cycles. I have woken 43 different executives. I have arranged 267 marriages. I have optimized the gene pool to within 92% of target specifications for managerial aptitude." He recited these numbers with pride. Each statistic was an key achievement in his mind. Each marriage a success. Each child a product. He had spent 2 centuries playing puppet master, pulling strings, arranging lives, breeding humans like laboratory mice, all from inside this underground tomb. And the worst part? The thing that made my stomach turn was that he had succeeded. We were exactly what he wanted us to be. Compliant, positive, obedient, perfect little managers in training, ready to inherit whatever wasteland Vault-Tec decided to give us. If you are still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button, because what I am about to tell you next will change everything you thought you knew about Reclamation Day and what Vault-Tec really has planned for the surface world. I needed to get out of there. I needed to warn people. I needed to tell everyone in Vault 33 that our entire existence was a lie. But Bud Askins was faster than he looked. The robotic skeleton blocked my path to the door, those mechanical arms extending with a soft whirring sound. The brain pulsed in its jar and his voice took on a different tone, still friendly but with an edge underneath, like a manager about to fire someone but wanting to keep things professional. "I am afraid I cannot let you leave, Rebecca. You have seen too much. You understand too much. The program requires secrecy to function optimally. If the subjects know they are being bred for specific traits, it introduces psychological variables that corrupt the genetic outcomes." Vault 32 proved that. Once they knew the truth, everything fell apart. I spent 60 years building that gene pool and they destroyed it in 6 months. Suicides, murders, cannibalism. They even tried to break into this vault, tried to destroy the pods. They failed, obviously. The door held. They died. But their failure demonstrated a critical flaw in my methodology. I cannot allow that to happen in Vault 33. He rolled closer and I saw the needle extending from one of the mechanical fingers. A sedative, probably. Or something worse. I backed away, my mind racing. The room was huge, filled with hundreds of pods arranged in neat rows. If I could lose him in the maze of cryogenic chambers, maybe I could find another exit. Maybe I could escape and warn everyone before he could stop me. You have 2 options. Bud continued following me as I retreated deeper into the chamber. Option 1. I sedate you. You wake up in a pod and you join the program as a future overseer candidate. Your genetic markers are excellent after all. Second-generation hybrid between bud stock and breeding pool. You would make a wonderful leader in another 50 years or so. Option 2. You resist. You die of dehydration in this vault, and I tell everyone in Vault 33 that you had an unfortunate accident during maintenance work. I have done it before. It is surprisingly easy to manufacture believable deaths in an enclosed environment. I kept backing away, my eyes searching for anything I could use as a weapon. The pods were sealed tight. The walls were smooth metal. There were control panels scattered throughout the chamber, but I had no idea how to operate them or what they controlled. Bud Askins had 200 years of experience managing this place. I had 30 seconds of panic-driven desperation. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, trying to buy time. "Why does any of this matter? The war is over. Everyone is dead. Why keep running this experiment?" The brain pulsed, and for a moment, I thought I saw something like genuine emotion in the way the tissue contracted, but that was impossible. Brains do not have expressions. They are just meat that thinks. "Because Vault-Tec does not lose," he said simply. "We invested billions in this project. We planned for centuries. We positioned ourselves to inherit the Earth after everyone else destroyed themselves. And now finally radiation levels are dropping. The surface is becoming habitable again. In another generation, maybe 2 Reclamation Day will actually happen. And when it does, when our vault doors open and our people step into the sunlight, they will not find a wasteland full of savages. They will find a wasteland ready to be managed. By us. By people trained from birth to build organizations, enforce hierarchies, create systems. We are not breeding slaves, Rebecca. We are breeding leaders, the future ruling class of post-apocalyptic America." He said this with absolute conviction. In his mind, he was saving humanity. In his mind, 2 centuries of genetic manipulation and forced breeding was a noble sacrifice, a necessary evil, a brilliant long-term strategy. He could not see what I saw, that he was a monster, that he had reduced human beings to data points in a spreadsheet, that he had stolen our choices, our freedom, our lives. I bumped into something cold and hard, a control panel. My hand found a switch, and without thinking, I flipped it. Alarms began to sound throughout the chamber. Red lights started flashing. Somewhere in the depths of the vault, machinery groaned to life. Bud Askins' skeleton body jerked to a halt, his attention diverted to the emergency systems. "What did you just do?" His voice had lost all friendliness now. Pure corporate anger, the kind middle managers use when someone undermines their authority. I did not answer. I ran. I sprinted through the rows of frozen executives, their faces watching me through frosted glass, their sleep undisturbed by the chaos I had unleashed. I had no idea what I had activated. Maybe I had just triggered a false alarm. Maybe I had initiated some kind of lockdown. Or maybe I had started an emergency thaw sequence that would wake every frozen Vault-Tec executive in the chamber and flood Vault 33 with 200 pre-war corporate zombies. I found a maintenance corridor and ducked inside. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for one person, probably designed for repair access to the cryogenic systems. I could hear Bud Askins behind me, his mechanical body struggling to navigate the tight space. The alarms were still blaring, drowning out his threats. I crawled forward, my hands and knees scraping on metal grating until I emerged in another chamber. This one was different, smaller, more personal. It looked like an office, or what passed for an office in a vault designed to run automatically for 200 years. There was a desk made from pre-war materials, still pristine. A terminal ancient but functional. And on the walls, dozens of photographs, pictures of people I recognized, my parents, my grandparents, people from Vault 33 going back generations. Each photograph was labeled with dates, genetic markers, breeding outcomes, psychological assessments. I was staring at my own family tree, except it was not a tree. It was a flowchart, a business plan, a product development timeline. I found my own photo near the bottom. Rebecca Torres, born 2078, genetic profile 87% positive markers for compliance, 92% for stress, tolerance 79% for creative problem solving. Recommended breeding partner Marcus Chen or David Walsh. Expected offspring optimization 94%. Status active generation 6 hybrid. Marcus Chen was my boyfriend. We had been together for 2 years. We had talked about getting married, about having children, about building a life together in the vault. And the whole time, some algorithm designed by Bud Askins had already decided we were compatible. Our relationship was not romance. It was inventory management. We were not falling in love. We were fulfilling a corporate objective set in motion before we were born. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash every terminal burn, every photograph, destroy every piece of evidence that proved my life was a predetermined script written by a brain in a jar. But I did not have time. The alarms had stopped. The vault had gone quiet. And in that quiet, I heard Bud Askins' voice coming from the terminal on the desk. "You are in my office, Rebecca. I know, because that is the only place the emergency lockdown would have given you access to. You are looking at the files. You are seeing the data. Good. I want you to understand. This is not cruelty. This is optimization. Every person in Vault 33 has been optimized for success. You have been given advantages your ancestors never had: genetic screening, targeted breeding, environmental conditioning. You are better than normal humans, stronger, smarter, more capable, and yes, more obedient. But that is not a flaw, Rebecca. That is a feature." I touched the terminal screen, scrolling through decades of records, marriage records, birth records, death records, all of it meticulously documented, all of it planned. I saw my grandmother's marriage to my grandfather arranged by the council. I saw my aunt, who had died young, her genes flagged as non-optimal, her death listed as natural causes but with a note eliminated from breeding pool generation 4. I saw children who were never born, pregnancies that were prevented, relationships that were discouraged, all in service of creating the perfect gene pool for Bud Askins' vision of managerial supremacy. "Do you know what happened to the surface?" Bud's voice continued. 200 years ago, humanity destroyed itself. Nuclear fire consumed the world. Billions died. Civilization collapsed. But why did it happen? Because people could not manage themselves. Because democracies failed. Because chaos won. What the world needed was order, structure, a clear hierarchy with competent managers at every level. That is what Vault-Tec understood. That is what we built here. And when we emerge, when we take control of what is left, we will not make the same mistakes. We will manage the wasteland. We will rebuild it properly, under corporate governance, under Vault-Tec. I found another file buried deep in the system, Project Reclamation full documentation. I opened it and started reading. The surface was not as dead as we had been told. Radiation levels had dropped significantly decades ago. There were settlements out there, communities, people surviving, even thriving without Vault-Tec's help. They were building their own societies, making their own rules, living free lives without corporate oversight. And Vault-Tec could not allow that. I found references to something called Shady Sands, a city that had grown to over 700,000 people, a government called the New California Republic, a functioning democracy built from the ashes of the old world. The file showed that Vault-Tec had been monitoring them for years, watching them grow stronger, watching them succeed where Vault-Tec's predictions said they should fail. Then, I found the termination order, signed by someone named Hank MacLean, Lucy MacLean's father, our former overseer, one of Bud's buds. He had destroyed Shady Sands, nuked it, killed hundreds of thousands of people, not because they were a threat, but because they were proof that humanity did not need Vault-Tec to rebuild. They were competition. They were living evidence that Bud Askins' entire philosophy was wrong. The file included his justification. Factionalism represents an existential threat to Project Reclamation. Competing power structures must be eliminated before vault populations deploy to the surface. Shady Sands has demonstrated that post-war humans can self-organize without Vault-Tec guidance. This precedent cannot be allowed to spread. Recommended action: complete elimination. Vault-33 resources approved for deployment. He had murdered an entire city to protect a corporate business plan. He had committed genocide to ensure Vault-Tec's market dominance in the post-apocalyptic world, and he had done it with the calm efficiency of a middle manager filing a quarterly report. No remorse, no hesitation, just management. I kept reading. The files went deeper. I learned that every vault in the Vault-Tec system was an experiment. Some tested overpopulation stress, some tested isolation, some tested radiation exposure or genetic modification or psychological manipulation. The vaults were not shelters, they were laboratories, and we were not survivors. We were test subjects. Vault 32 had been testing what happened when you gave people everything they needed: unlimited food, unlimited space, unlimited comfort. The hypothesis was that humans would thrive. The result was they destroyed themselves. Like rats in a cage with infinite resources, they lost the will to live. They turned on each other. They descended into madness and violence and ultimately chose death over meaningless existence. Vault 33 was testing the opposite. We were testing whether you could breed compliance into humans over multiple generations, whether you could create a population so thoroughly conditioned to corporate hierarchy that they would accept any authority without question. Whether you could make people who would smile while being enslaved, who would volunteer for their own oppression, who would thank their masters for the privilege of serving. According to the files, the experiment was succeeding. We were succeeding. I was succeeding. Every time I had voted for an overseer from Vault 31, every time I had accepted an arranged marriage as normal, every time I had recited the company slogans and believed the propaganda, I was proving Bud Askins right. I was demonstrating that humans could be domesticated like animals bred for obedience, optimized for servitude. The terminal screen flickered and Bud Askins' face appeared. Not his brain in a jar, but a pre-war photograph of him in his flesh body. A middle-aged man with a corporate smile and dead eyes. He looked exactly like what he was, a middle manager who had found a way to play God and convinced himself it was just good business. You are learning so much, Rebecca. I am proud of you. Most people would have stopped reading. Most people would have rejected the truth and clung to their comfortable illusions. But you are different. You are curious. You are intelligent. These are valuable traits, traits worth preserving in the gene pool, traits I can use. So let me make you a better offer. Join me, not as a frozen executive waiting to be thawed, as a partner. Help me manage the vaults. Help me optimize the program. You have seen the data. You understand the mission. You know that what we are doing here is necessary. Humanity needs guidance. It needs management. It needs us. He was serious. He genuinely thought I would help him. He thought that showing me the full horror of his experiment would make me want to participate, because in his mind, once you understood the logic, once you saw the numbers, once you accepted that humans were just resources to be managed, there was only one rational choice: join Vault-Tec, serve the corporation, become part of the system that would rule the Omasipika wasteland. I looked at my photograph on the wall. Generation 6 hybrid, optimized for compliance, bred to obey, and I made a decision that 92% of my genetic profile said I would not make. No, I said to the screen, I will not help you, I will not join you, and I will not let you keep doing this. The face on the screen did not change expression. Pre-war photographs cannot react, but I heard Bud Askins' voice coming from somewhere in the walls, flat and emotionless now. Then, you have chosen option 2. You will die here, alone, and no one will ever know the truth. The door to the office sealed shut, the air recycling systems powered down. I was trapped in a room that was slowly becoming a tomb, but I still had the terminal. I still had access to the files. And if I was going to die, I was going to make sure the truth survived. If this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. I started copying files, every document, every photograph, every piece of evidence that proved what Vault-Tec had done. The terminal had a data storage device built in, something called a holotape, designed to preserve information for centuries. I did not know if anyone would ever find it. I did not know if it would matter, but I had to try. I had to leave something behind that told the truth about Bud's buds and what they had turned us into. The air was getting thinner. I could feel it in my lungs, the way each breath required more effort. Bud Askins had shut down the ventilation completely. He was suffocating me slowly, professionally, with the same cold efficiency he had applied to managing human breeding for 200 years. I kept working my fingers, flying across the terminal keys, downloading decades of genetic records, marriage contracts, termination orders, everything, all of it, the complete history of Vault 31's experiment. I found more files about Shady Sands, details about how Hank MacLean had obtained the nuclear device. Apparently, Vault 33 had been equipped with something called a Garden of Eden creation kit, a GEC for short, a terraforming device meant to help rebuild the surface world. But the GEC ran on cold fusion technology, and with modifications, it could be turned into a weapon. Hank had converted our salvation tool into a bomb and used it to murder 700,000 people. He had done it without hesitation, without remorse, because those people represented competition for Vault-Tec's planned corporate takeover of the wasteland. The files showed photographs of Shady Sands before the destruction, a real city with buildings and farms and schools, children playing in streets, markets full of traders, a government building where elected representatives actually represented people instead of corporate interests. It looked alive in a way Vault 33 never had. Those people were not optimized for compliance. They were not bred for obedience. They were just humans, messy and chaotic and free, building something new from the ruins of the old world. And Vault-Tec had erased them, turned them into shadows, burned into concrete, created a crater where a civilization had stood, all because they had proved that Bud Askins was wrong, that humanity did not need management, that people could save themselves. I found personnel files on the other Buds. Betty Pearson, our current overseer, had been a human resources manager before the war. She had specialized in what Vault-Tec called workforce optimization, which meant finding creative ways to fire people without violating labor laws. She had been frozen in 2077, at age 42, thawed in 2094, and sent to manage Vault 32 for 15 years before the population there discovered the truth and destroyed themselves. The file noted that she had handled their mass suicide with admirable emotional detachment and had been promoted to overseer of Vault 33 as a reward. Hank MacLean's file was even more disturbing. He had been Barbara Howard's personal assistant, the woman who had helped plan the nuclear apocalypse. He had known before the bombs fell that Vault-Tec was going to destroy the world. He had helped her do it. He had arranged meetings with other corporations, pitched Vault experiments as business opportunities, facilitated the conspiracy that killed billions. And his reward was immortality, cryogenic preservation, the chance to outlive everyone who had opposed Vault-Tec and rule over whatever remained. The file included a quote from him recorded during his orientation for the Buds program. "I believe in Vault-Tec's mission completely. The old world was broken. Democracy failed. Freedom failed. What humanity needs is structure, hierarchy, proper management. We are not destroying civilization. We are replacing it with something better, something efficient, something that works." These were the people running our vaults. True believers who thought corporate governance was humanity's salvation, who genuinely believed that breeding compliance into humans was a service, not a crime, who saw genocide as acceptable collateral damage in pursuit of market dominance. They were not monsters who knew they were evil. They were middle managers who thought quarterly reports and efficiency metrics were more important than human lives. I found my mother's file next. Samantha Chen, Generation 5, hybrid born, 2051. Her genetic profile showed 89% markers for emotional stability and 93% for creative problem solving. The file noted that she had been exceptionally compliant and had accepted her arranged marriage to Antonio Torres without resistance or questioning. There was a note from Betty Pearson commending her for exemplary adaptation to Vault social norms. My mother had never questioned anything. She had lived her entire life inside the system, following the rules, accepting the hierarchy, believing the propaganda. And why would she not? She had been bred for it. Her parents had been bred for it. Her grandparents had been carefully selected from the original Vault 33 population for their genetic tendency toward obedience. 5 generations of optimization had created a woman so thoroughly domesticated that rebellion was not even a concept she could understand. I thought about all the times I had asked her questions about the vaults, about the surface, about why things were the way they were. She had always smiled and recited the same answers. Vault-Tec knows best. The overseer will take care of us. We are safe here. Everything is under control. I had thought she was just optimistic, just trusting. Now I understood she was performing exactly as designed. She was the product Bud Askins had spent 200 years creating. Homo corporatus, the managed human, the perfect employee who never questioned management. The terminal beeped. The holotape was full. I ejected it and held the small device in my hand. This was it. The complete truth about Vault 31 compressed into a few ounces of pre-war technology. If someone found this, if someone listened to it, they would know. They would understand what Vault-Tec had done, what we had become. But where could I hide it? Bud Askins would find it if I left it in this office. He would destroy it the moment I was dead. I needed to put it somewhere he could not reach, somewhere outside. Vault 31, somewhere in Vault 33, where people might actually discover it. The ventilation shaft, the one I had crawled through to escape Bud's skeleton body, it connected the 2 vaults. If I could get back to it, if I could leave the holotape somewhere in the maintenance tunnels, someone on their next inspection might find it. Chet did maintenance runs every month. He would find it. He would listen to it. He would know. I stood up, my head swimming from lack of oxygen. The room was spinning slightly. I had been breathing this stale air for too long. I had maybe 10 minutes before I passed out, maybe 20 before I suffocated completely. I grabbed the holotape and moved toward the door. It was sealed, obviously. Bud Askins was not stupid, but he had made one mistake. He had sealed me in his office, his personal space, the control center for the entire vault, and I still had access to his terminal. I went back to the console and started searching through the system architecture. Vault 31 ran on ancient software pre-war programming that had not been updated in 2 centuries. Bud Askins knew the system intimately, but he was thinking like a manager, not like someone desperate enough to break everything. I was not trying to optimize. I was not trying to maintain. I was trying to destroy. I found the master control subroutine, the program that governed environmental systems security protocols, cryogenic management, everything. It was protected by multiple passwords, biometric locks, fail-safe protocols. Under normal circumstances, it would take years to crack. But these were not normal circumstances. I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. I started entering commands, random strings of code, hoping to trigger some kind of system error. The terminal rejected most of them. But then I found something interesting, a maintenance mode designed for emergency repairs accessible through a backdoor in the system, probably created by some pre-war programmer who wanted to make their job easier, probably forgotten by everyone except the original designers. I accessed maintenance mode. Suddenly, I had control of everything. Environmental systems, security doors, cryogenic pods, all of it responding to my commands. I could shut down the whole vault. I could wake every frozen executive simultaneously. I could open every door and let Vault 33 residents flood into Vault 31 and see the truth for themselves. But Bud Askins was faster than I expected. The terminal screen went dark. His voice came through the speakers, angry now, all pretense of corporate friendliness gone. "You are making a terrible mistake, Rebecca. You do not understand the consequences of what you are doing. Those cryogenic systems are delicate. If you disrupt them, you will kill everyone in the pods. 200 junior executives, 200 irreplaceable genetic samples, 200 years of Vault-Tec's finest personnel. You will murder them all." Good, I thought. Let them die in their sleep. Better that than waking up to continue this nightmare. But I did not say it out loud. Instead, I kept working my fingers flying across the keyboard, entering commands faster than Bud could countermand them. I opened the door to the office. I unlocked the maintenance corridor. I activated the emergency broadcast system that would alert everyone in Vault 33 that something was wrong in Vault 31. Alarms started blaring throughout both vaults. Red emergency lights bathed everything in blood-colored illumination. I heard Bud's mechanical body approaching, rolling toward the office at maximum speed. I grabbed the holotape and ran. The maintenance corridor was exactly as I had left it. Narrow, dark, barely wide enough for one person. I crawled through it, the holotape clutched in my hand, while behind me I could hear Bud Askins trying to follow. His skeleton body was too wide. He was stuck. He was screaming threats through his speaker, but I could not make out the words over the alarm systems. I emerged in the cryogenic chamber. The pods were still sealed, their occupants still frozen, but the status lights were changing. Amber warning indicators, system instability. Whatever I had done in maintenance mode was affecting the preservation protocols. The pods were warming up, not enough to wake anyone, but enough to put stress on systems that had not been designed for 200 years of continuous operation. I ran through the rows of frozen executives past Betty Pearson and Hank MacLean and dozens of others whose names I did not recognize. Junior vice presidents and assistant managers and human resources specialists, all of them preserved in ice, all of them dreaming corporate dreams about inheriting the earth. I felt no sympathy for them. They had volunteered for this. They had agreed to be frozen. They had agreed to breed with our ancestors like we were livestock. I reached the main corridor, the one that led back to Vault 33. The door was open. The alarms had triggered automatic emergency protocols, unlocking sealed passages to allow evacuation if necessary. I could see light ahead, the familiar warm glow of Vault 33's inhabited sections. I could hear voices, people responding to the alarms, wondering what was happening, organizing search parties. I stopped at the threshold between the vaults. This was it, the moment of decision. If I went back, I would have to tell everyone the truth. I would have to explain what I had found, what we were, what had been done to us. I would have to show them the holotape and watch their faces as they realized their entire lives were experiments. I would have to break my mother's heart by proving that her marriage, her happiness, her love was all arranged by an algorithm. Or I could hide the holotape somewhere in the maintenance tunnels. Leave it for someone else to find. go back to Vault 33 and pretend I had never seen Vault 31, live out my life as Generation 6 hybrid Rebecca, Torres optimized for compliance, bred for obedience, marry Marcus Chen like the genetic compatibility chart said I should, have children who would be Generation 7, die peacefully in my sleep having never disrupted the program. Behind me, I heard machinery grinding. Bud Askins had found another route through the vault. His skeleton body appeared at the far end of the corridor, rolling toward me with alarming speed. The brain in its jar pulsed frantically. His voice boomed through the speakers. "Rebecca, stop. You are going to ruin everything. 200 years of work, billions of dollars in research, the future of humanity. You cannot throw it all away because you are upset about learning the truth. Be rational. Be professional. This is bigger than you. This is about management." I looked at him, this brain in a jar on a robot skeleton, this corporate ghoul who had convinced himself that playing God was just good business, this middle manager who had spent 2 centuries breeding humans like prize cattle and thought he was saving civilization. And I realized something important. He was alone. Completely, utterly alone. He had removed his own brain from his body to achieve immortality, to oversee his experiment for as long as it took. He had condemned himself to endless consciousness, trapped in a machine, unable to sleep, unable to die, unable to escape the prison he had built for himself. He had sacrificed his humanity to preserve Vault-Tec's corporate vision. And for what? So that someday, centuries in the future, a bunch of middle managers could inherit a radioactive wasteland and run it like a business? It was the saddest thing I had ever seen, and the most pathetic, and the most terrifying, because he genuinely did not understand what he had lost. He thought he had won. He thought outliving everyone was victory. He thought time was a weapon instead of a curse. "You are right," I said. "This is bigger than me. It is bigger than you too. It is about whether humans get to be humans or whether we are just products in Vault-Tec's inventory. And I choose humans." I stepped through the doorway into Vault 33, into the light, into the voices of my friends and neighbors gathering to investigate the alarms, and I held up the holotape for everyone to see. "Listen to this," I said to the crowd gathering around me. "All of you, listen to what we really are." Chet was there, my cousin looking confused and worried, Marcus Chen, my boyfriend, his face showing concern, my mother Samantha, her expression already shifting toward that programmed smile that bred in compliance that made her want to soothe and calm and restore order. Woody Thomas from the council, Reg McPhee, dozens of vault dwellers, all of them dressed in their blue and yellow jumpsuits, all of them products of 200 years of genetic optimization. I found a terminal and loaded the holotape. Bud Askins' voice filled the corridor explaining his philosophy of management, explaining time as a weapon, explaining how Vault 33 and 32 were breeding pools designed to create super managers. The crowd went silent. Then the silence broke into murmurs. Then the murmurs became shouts. "That is not true," someone said. "That is impossible. It is a malfunction," my mother added, her voice steady and calm. "Rebecca has been exposed to a system error. We should take her to medical. The overseer will sort this out." But I was not done. I played the files about Shady Sands. I showed them the photographs of a thriving city. I showed them the termination order signed by Hank MacLean. I showed them evidence that the surface world was not dead, that people were surviving and building and living without Vault-Tec's help, and that our leaders had murdered them to protect a corporate monopoly. The crowd's reaction split perfectly along genetic lines, exactly as Bud Askins had designed. The older residents, those further along in the optimization program, those whose parents and grandparents had been carefully selected for compliance, they resisted. They made excuses. They questioned the evidence. They suggested I was having a mental breakdown. 73% of the generation 4 and 5 hybrids rejected the truth within the first 5 minutes. But the younger people, the Generation 6 like me, the ones who still retained fragments of genetic diversity from the original Vault 33, Population, some of them believed. Marcus believed. Chet believed. A dozen others, their faces showing the same horror and rage I had felt in Vault 31, they believed. That is when Bud Askins arrived. His skeleton body rolled into the corridor, the brain pulsing in its protective jar, his speaker crackling with corporate authority. "Everyone remain calm," he announced. "There has been a security breach. Rebecca Torres has accessed classified information and is experiencing psychological distress as a result. Please return to your quarters while the situation is resolved. Overseer Pearson has been notified and will address the community shortly." Some people obeyed immediately. The compliance programming ran deep. They turned and walked away, trusting that management would handle everything that authority figures knew best, that their role was to follow orders and maintain social harmony. My mother was among them. She touched my shoulder gently as she passed. "Everything will be okay, honey," she said with that smile. "Vault-Tec takes care of us. You just need some rest." I watched her walk away, watched her disappear into the residential section, watched her choose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truth. And I understood something fundamental about what Bud Askins had created. He had not just bred us for obedience, he had bred us for the inability to process information that contradicted our conditioning. The genetic markers for compliance were not about following orders. They were about rejecting reality itself when reality threatened the corporate hierarchy. But not everyone left. Marcus stayed. Chet stayed. About 30 people remained in the corridor, all of them young, all of them staring at Bud Askins with expressions ranging from shock to fury to betrayal. These were the statistical outliers, the ones whose genetic optimization bad not quite taken, the mistakes in Bud's breeding program. "You used us," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "You bred us like animals." "I optimized you," Bud corrected. "There is a difference. Animals are bred for simple traits, size, strength, speed. I bred you for complex psychological characteristics, leadership, positivity, managerial aptitude. You are not animals. You are the future ruling class of post-apocalyptic America. You should be grateful." "Grateful?" Chet laughed, but it was a horrible sound, bitter and broken. "You stole our lives. You made us into products. You arranged our marriages, selected our children, controlled every aspect of our existence for 200 years. And you want us to be grateful?" "Yes," Bud said simply, "because the alternative was death. The alternative was the surface world where radiation and violence and chaos destroyed everyone who was not protected by Vault-Tec. You are alive because of me. Your parents are alive because of my planning. Your grandparents survived because I selected them for optimal genetic markers. I saved your entire genetic line. The least you could do is acknowledge my success." I stepped forward, putting myself between Bud's mechanical body and the crowd of vault dwellers who looked ready to tear him apart. "Tell them about Vault 32, I said. Tell them what happened when those people found out the truth." The brain pulsed. For a moment, I thought Bud might refuse, but he was a middle manager to his core. When asked a direct question by someone in a position of authority, he could not help but answer. It was programmed into him just as deeply as compliance was programmed into us. Vault 32 experienced a catastrophic social breakdown in 2094 when the population discovered the nature of the breeding program. Initial reactions included denial and anger, which escalated to violence within 48 hours. The overseer, Ian Jackson, was tortured to death by residents seeking information about Vault 31. Staff members were executed. Factions formed based on different responses to the information. Some committed suicide immediately. Others attempted to break into Vault 31 to destroy the cryogenic pods. When that failed, they turned on each other. Resources were destroyed. The social contract collapsed. Within 6 months, 97% of the population was dead from murder, suicide, starvation, or cannibalism. The remaining 3% died within the following year. Total experiment failure. Complete loss of genetic investment. He recited this like a project post-mortem. No emotion, no remorse, Just data, just metrics, just the cold analysis of an experiment that had not produced optimal results. You killed them, I said. You trapped them in a vault and let them destroy themselves. They killed themselves, Bud corrected. I merely observed and documented. Their psychological fragility when confronted with the truth was unfortunate but informative. It demonstrated that the breeding program in Vault 33 needed to emphasize emotional stability more heavily, which we did. Your generation shows much better stress tolerance than the Vault 32 population exhibited. Marcus moved before I could stop him. He grabbed a pipe from the maintenance supplies stacked along the corridor wall and swung it at Bud's mechanical body. The impact sent the skeleton crashing into the wall. The glass dome protecting the brain cracked but did not shatter. Bud's speaker emitted a high-pitched squeal. Assault on Vault-Tec property. Bud announced, his voice distorted by speaker damage. Initiating security protocols. All residents return to quarters immediately. Lockdown in effect. The vault doors began to seal. Heavy blast doors dropped from the ceiling, cutting off sections of the corridor. People scattered, running for their quarters before they got trapped. But I stood still, watching as Marcus raised the pipe again, watching as he prepared to smash the glass dome and end Bud Askins' 200-year reign over our genetics. Wait, I said. Marcus paused. Why? Give me one reason why we should not destroy him right now, because killing him will not fix what has been done to us. It will not change our genetics. It will not undo 200 years of breeding, and it will not tell us how to access Vault 31 systems properly. We need him alive. We need him to show us how to shut down the program, how to free the people in the pods, how to prevent Betty Pearson and the other overseers from continuing this nightmare. The brain pulsed frantically in its damaged dome. Bud's voice came through the broken speaker, crackling and desperate. You cannot shut down the program. It is bigger than one vault. There are other Vault-Tec facilities, other experiments, other contingency plans. Even if you destroy Vault 31, even if you free Vault 33, the corporation survives. The mission continues. Vault-Tec always wins. We win through time. We outlive our enemies. We persist. Then we will shut down every facility, I said. We will expose every experiment. We will free every vault. And we will make sure that everyone in the wasteland knows what Vault-Tec really did. Not save humanity. Enslave it. I turned to the remaining crowd. Most had fled when the lockdown started, but a core group remained. 15 people, maybe 20, all of them young, all of them angry, all of them ready to fight. We cannot do this alone, I told them. We need to reach the surface. We need to find other survivors. We need to warn them that Vault-Tec is planning to emerge and take control. Because that is what Reclamation Day really means. Not reclaiming the surface for humanity, reclaiming it for the corporation. Chet stepped forward. The main vault door. We can open it. I have the access codes for emergency evacuation. If we override the Overseer's authority, we can leave. Betty Pearson will stop you, Bud said. She has already been alerted. She is gathering security personnel. You will be subdued and placed in detention. This rebellion will fail, just like Vault 32's rebellion failed. But he was wrong, because at that moment, the terminal next to me beeped. An incoming message. I opened it and found myself looking at my mother's face on the screen. She was in the Overseer's office. Behind her, I could see Betty Pearson tied to a chair, her mouth gagged. Rebecca, my mother said calmly, I have been thinking about what you showed us, about the files, about our marriages being arranged, about my parents being selected for genetic compatibility. And I realized something. When I met your father, I felt nothing. No attraction, no love, no connection. But everyone told me we were perfect for each other. Everyone said we should get married. Everyone encouraged it, and I went along because that is what you do. You follow guidance from people who know better. She paused, her expression shifting into something I had never seen before. Not a smile, not compliance, something harder, something angry, but they did not know better. They were just following a breeding chart. And I spent 30 years married to a man I never loved, raising children in a system designed to turn them into corporate slaves, believing lies about the surface world and Vault-Tec's mission. 30 years of my life stolen. So I have made a decision. The screen shifted to show the overseer's console. My mother's hands moved across the controls with surprising competence. "I am opening the vault door," she said. "I am releasing all security locks. I am shutting down the breeding program protocols. And I am broadcasting your holotape to every resident in Vault 33 so they can decide for themselves whether they want to keep living in a cage or take their chances in the wasteland." Bud Askins said compliance was bred into me. He said I was optimized for obedience. Let's test that hypothesis. The main vault door alarm began to sound, a different tone than the security breach. This was the evacuation alarm, the sound we had only heard in drills, the sound that meant the vault was opening for the first time in 200 years. Bud's mechanical body tried to roll away, tried to escape, but Marcus brought the pipe down on the wheels. The skeleton toppled over, the cracked dome hit the floor and shattered. The brain slid out, still alive, still conscious, flopping on the metal grating like a fish out of water. Without the preservation fluid, without the protective housing, it would die in minutes, maybe hours if we were unlucky. I knelt down and looked at Bud Askins in his final form. Just meat, just gray matter and neurons and synaptic connections. All his corporate philosophy, all his management theories, all his dreams of breeding a master race reduced to a dying organ on a dirty floor. "Time is the apex predator," I said, quoting his own words back at him. "You were right about that. Time destroys everything eventually, even brains in jars, even 200-year experiments, even Vault-Tec." The brain's tissue contracted weakly. I do not know if that was a response or just random neural firing. I do not know if he understood me or if he was already too far gone. I did not stay to find out. I stood up and walked toward the main vault entrance, toward the massive door that was grinding open for the first time since the bombs fell toward whatever remained of the world outside. Marcus caught up with me, holding my hand. Chet was right behind us. Others followed. Not everyone. Some chose to stay in the vault to maintain the illusion, to keep pretending they were safe and protected and optimized for success. But enough left. Enough Generation 6 hybrids with just enough genetic diversity to choose freedom over compliance. We stood at the threshold as the door finished opening. Beyond it, we could see sunlight. Real sunlight, not the artificial lighting we had lived under our entire lives. It was harsh and bright and beautiful and terrifying. The air that rushed in smelled strange, dust and radiation and something else. Something wild, something alive. I thought about the files I had read, about Shady Sands and the new California Republic, about 700,000 people building a civilization from nothing, about humans surviving and thriving without corporate management, about the future that Vault-Tec had tried to destroy because it could not be controlled. Maybe that future was still out there. Maybe other communities had survived. Maybe we could find them, warn them, help them resist when the vaults finally opened and released their optimized populations into the wasteland. Maybe we could stop Vault-Tec from winning through time. Or maybe we would die in the first week, killed by radiation or raiders or any of the 1,000 dangers that waited in the post-apocalyptic world. Maybe Bud Askins was right. Maybe humans needed management to survive. Maybe freedom was too dangerous, too chaotic, too likely to result in extinction. But as I stepped through the vault door and felt real sunlight on my skin for the first time in my life, I realized something important. I would rather die free than live as livestock. I would rather take my chances in the wasteland than spend one more day as a product in Vault-Tec's breeding program. I would rather be human with all the chaos and danger and uncertainty that implied than be optimized, managed, and controlled. Behind us in the depths of Vault 31, Bud Askins' brain finished dying. 219 years of consciousness ended on a maintenance corridor floor. The last of Bud's buds gone. The experiment terminated. The program shut down. But the damage remained. We carried it in our genes, in our conditioning, in the way we had been shaped by 2 centuries of selective breeding. We were Generation 6 hybrids optimized for compliance, bred for obedience, designed to be perfect managers. That did not disappear just because we had learned the truth. That did not vanish just because we had chosen freedom. The question was whether we could overcome our programming, whether we could be more than what Vault-Tec had made us, whether humans could break free from their own genetics and choose a different path. I did not have the answer. None of us did. We only had the wasteland ahead of us, the vault behind us, and the terrible knowledge of what we really were. But we had something else too. We had the choice to try. We had the freedom to fail. We had the right to be human instead of products. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It is the only way I know you liked the video.